So earlier today, Dan Argueta versus Nick Aguirre was announced for this weekend. So we're getting more and more short notice fights. I don't know what it is about short notice fights, man, but they do just get me a little bit more excited than the standard fights. But I do think Dan Argueta is going to win this one. I went and watched all of Nick Aguirre's tape that I could in his pro career. I admittedly didn't watch any amateur fights. I just watched the pro fights, and I am impressed. This guy's really good. But he's dominating levels of competition that like you would expect to dominate before you get into the UFC, which is not a bad thing whatsoever. In my opinion, I think he's proven that he's definitely above the level of like regional guys. I think he's ready for his big jump in competition, but maybe the big jump in competition that he was ready for isn't quite like a 4 days notice fight against Dan Argueta. I like Nick Aguirre as a prospect. I think he's going to fight at 135 pounds in the UFC after this fight, win or lose. Even if he does beat Dan Argueta, I do expect him to fight at 135. What he brings to the table is a pretty good wrestling base. He does have a wrestling base. He's got really good jiu-jitsu as well. He's always looking for submissions. He will even like sacrifice a good position to get a submission. A perfect example is over Tyler DeHaven on Anthony Pettis FC2. You can watch that fight on UFC Fight Pass, where he's on top of Tyler. He gets a takedown within like 20 seconds of the first round, and takes him down, gets on top of him, and then Tyler DeHaven's working his way up, and Nick Aguirre sacrifices the top position that he had, and he gets a guillotine, and he takes bottom position, and he gets the guillotine choke pretty quickly. Brandon Clausen as well. This was a fight I was very interested in watching. You can find this fight pretty easily. It might even be on my history here. Coliseum Combat 61. He fought at Coliseum Combat 61. This is a fight that isn't too hard to find. It's on YouTube under Coliseum Combat 61 under this Fast Play Sports YouTube channel. I was very interested in watching this fight because it's his only fight that actually went to the second round as a professional. And yeah, in the first round he just takes down Brandon Clausen, dominates him on top, works for a rear naked choke in the second round, and just shows that he's levels and levels above these guys. And I think that, yeah, as I said, I think he's ready for a jump up in competition. Maybe a jump up against Dan Argueta on 4 days' notice is a bit too much of a jump up. But I do think, win or lose, you're going to see this guy in the UFC for a while. And I do think he's going to fight at 135 pounds. He fought Thomas De Leon at 155. He fought Tyler DeHaven, I believe, at 135. And that's where he looked his best, in my opinion. I like him at 135. He fought Coulson at 145. I think he fought Zach Richard at 140 pounds. And a couple of these earlier fights, he's at 135 or 140. But yeah, Nick Aguirre fight at 145. It's not like he's never fought in this weight class before. Dan Argueta, more of a natural bantamweight himself as well. Actually, spent his whole career at bantamweight, 135 pounds, and then he went to 145 on short notice against Damon Jackson, and then he had another fight booked against Isaac Dalgarian, who Nick Aguirre is replacing at 145 pounds. So I don't know if Dan Argueta is wanting to stay at 145 or if he's wanting to maybe drop back down to 135 himself, but I like Nick Aguirre as a prospect, but I do think Dan Argueta will win. They're both really good wrestlers. They're both really good grapplers, but Dan Argueta's had the full training camp. He's had the higher level of competition. He fought a 14-6 opponent in Diego Silva, 12-0 Myron Santos, 6-3, 4-1. The Ultimate Fighter, he fought Ricky Turcios to a very competitive fight. He also fought Damon Jackson on short notice and made a good account for himself, in my opinion. But yeah, Nick Aguirre. He's a good prospect, good grappler, good wrestler, but I do think that Dan Argueta is the better striker as well. But I didn't see much of Nick Aguirre's striking. This guy instantly shoots for takedowns in his fights. I haven't seen anyone else break down this fight, although I do believe at the time of me posting this, someone else would have already done a video. But I am going with Argueta by decision. It'll be interesting to see what other people's takes on Aguirre is. Maybe they think that he is really good. Maybe they weren't that impressed by the tape. I was very impressed by the tape. I like Nick Aguirre. I think he's a great prospect. He's very funny actually. He's got a pretty good attitude about him. Like he's quite brash. He's a showman. You know, this guy could definitely win over a crowd if he fought in front of a crowd. I like Nick Aguirre. I do like him as a prospect. I think he does well in the UFC, but I do think Dan Argueta wins this fight with his wrestling and grappling himself. So it'll be interesting to see what happens.